Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them, the Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Jonathan Knowles. Today's topic, must marketing always start from scratch? The quixotic quest to end the Snowflake problem. I'm sure I said that wrong, but Jonathan will correct me later. Now, Jonathan has been many things, including a CMO, the SVP at Brand Economics, the Managing Director at Brand Finance, and the Senior Strategist at Wolf Owens. He runs his own consulting firm called Type 2, which specializes in marketing strategy that aligns with finance and accounting. Full disclosure, Jonathan and I met through the A&A project referenced in this title. The project is designed to create a marketing toolbox for use with CFOs and others in the C-suite to create a set of options for evaluating marketing's value. While still early in the process, we've been authorized officially by the A&A to give you a sneak peek. Welcome, Jonathan.
Great to be here, Mike.
Now, before we begin, I have to outline the Snowflake problem and what the project really is. And the real deal is, when you start a new marketing job, often you start from zero. And there's no way to evaluate marketing. You basically, in many instances, unless you're at a consumer products company or a company that's totally bought into marketing, you have to design your own approach to this. The idea behind this project is it doesn't make any sense that when Procter buys Gillette, billions of dollars accrue to the balance sheet for the value of the brand, but there's no value on the balance sheet for the Procter brands like Tide and Crest. The theory was there's probably a number of ways to evaluate marketing. We could define those ways and put them in a toolbox, which would give marketers a head start with their CFOs, CEOs, and board members. Job one was to understand what was out there already. And Jonathan took the lead on that. So, Jonathan, describe the process and what you learned.
Sure. Well, maybe I should back up just to say, is variety a problem? And my belief is that variety is not a problem. Unexplained variety just looks like inconsistency.
And one thing, when you say variety in analyzing marketing or evaluating it?
No, in when you look at a marketer and, it's the subject of so many jokes that the marketers can't even decide what to call themselves. Are they growth officers? Are they chief customer experience officers? Are they chief revenue officers? Who are they? And the answer is there are lots of different things. And that's a problem from finance's point of view, because finance is very specific about processes and outcomes. And it looks like marketing doesn't have a process and marketing doesn't deliver an outcome. So that to me was the problem that you and I have been addressing in this work with the A&A.
Great, thank you for that. So tell us, you went out in the market, I watched you, and sourced all the material basically that was written about marketing by almost anybody. Is that right? Tell us about the process.
Yeah, well, there were two main bits of the process. One was an analysis of the literature to say, can we find reasons in the literature why this variation exists? Or can we find what we sometimes call frameworks or schools of thought? That was job number one. Job number two was to look at the financial structure of firms and saying, how much variation is there in how companies make money and how they interact with their customers? And should that cause the job of marketing to be different? So two parallel and very complementary types of research.
And so I would say those are two foundational pieces before you even begin the toolbox, which is let's look at the lay of the land. And I think you took all these papers or everything that had been written about marketing. So we're on step one, and you analyzed them. And then, I mean, you analyzed them and ran them through all kinds of gronkulators and top secret analysis. And I think they came out with like 6 ways, kind of. But tell us about this. Tell us about these papers and what they concluded.
Well, when you call for a plumber, you just want the water to come out. So the punchline is that there are 2 whys and 6 hows of marketing. The long version, as we go underneath the sink and start undoing the faucet, is that we began with a set of articles that the steering committee put together by the ANA recommended. We then augmented that into a library of the best articles about marketing accountability. That's where we started. So there are probably about 150 of those. We then engaged with some really talented academic researchers at ASU and used semantic search to then augment that pile of 150 papers and turn it into 530. And working with the researchers, I'm ashamed to say I manually coded those 530 papers about marketing accountability so that the researchers could then do a more sophisticated clustering than is possible just using keywords. And that
sounds super fun, by the way. I mean, it was. But I think what I really like doing manual coding paper sounds.
But you know, good quality of data in, or high integrity of data in, generally produces better outcomes at the back end. Garbage in, garbage.
Look, I think it's been a very thorough and detailed process with tons of analytics going in there. So you run through these papers, and I will say one of the things I told the ANA when we started this project was these papers are fantastic. None of them ever really, honestly, helped me. What helped me is if I started a consumer goods company and they got it right away, marketing was up at the wheel. But almost all the other places I went to, you had a Snowflake problem. Yeah. So tell us what happens here. You analyzed these over 500 papers. What does it show?
It shows you
2 and 5.
It shows you that there are 6 main ways that marketing can be structured, and those ways are determined by what you think you should be measuring. So let's begin with the easy ones, which are
and one of the things, when you say structured, it's kind of how they approach and evaluate everything they do, how they account for it, right?
It is literally that. It's the unit of account. So some of these approaches are based on the customer as the unit of account, and those are the gold standard. If you've got customer data, you're going to want to use customer data. Yeah. And we found 2 main flavors of customer. You've either got the account-based marketing, which is typically where you've got a small number of customers, big purchases, long purchase cycle, and you know your customers and you're nurturing them. And then you've got what's now become known, and you've talked to Pete Vader and Dan McCarthy, what's known as customer-based corporate valuation. Those are typically high transaction, first-party data. You don't have a one-to-one relationship. You manage them as a cohort. So those are 2 schools. And if you've got customer data, you're going to want to use it as a marketer. Right. But what happens if you don't have first-party data? Like most FMCG companies don't have a direct relationship with their customer. Most product-based companies sell through intermediaries. I've done way too much work in my time.
And just so everybody, all our listeners know, that's fast-moving consumer goods. That's right. FMCG. So keep going.
But we assume that FMCG is the model for marketing, and it's not. FMCG is a very weird little segment of the marketing world, and we wanted to find out what the other segments were. So we've got segment 1, which is small number of customers, typically first-party data. Segment 2 is large number of customers, high velocity of transactions. Then you've got, the product marketing crowd, which is often where the product is the thing. It has a release cycle, whether it's software or whether it's the next generation of industrial generator or whether it's a pharmaceutical product. The thing is the thing. And so your unit of account is rightly the product because it's got a development cycle. But then you've got an interesting group of companies that really sell through their people. They're selling experience. Obviously, hospitality is the one that comes to mind. Ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. The best way to deliver a Ritz-Carlton experience is to treat your own employees right. But this goes for any industry in which the talent is really what your brand is. So that could be law firms and consultancy firms, and it could be airlines. So what we found was that each of these 6 marketing models is really built around a different philosophy of how you succeed in the marketplace. Is it with the product? Is it with the customer relationship? Is it via your employees? Or do you have to go through a brand because you're selling to people you don't know through channels whose data you don't collect? So brand is a proxy. We never really wanted to measure brand. We really wanted to measure customers.
So if I summarize all this, there's like 6 evaluation methods, and they all want the same thing. I mean, everybody kind of all wants the same thing in the long run, regardless of whether they're CFO, the CEO, the CMO, or the board. What you want is profitable, sustainable, and often predictable growth. But one of the things that has come out of our discussions and our work on this project is, if you are using, let's just say there's 6 tools here, and we are still in the process of defining these. But if you are using the wrong tool in the wrong place, you will have a dramatic mismatch with the rest of your company, and your measures will probably not work for you and the rest of the company. And the idea behind this is we're gonna give you over time this toolbox, and you can decide what works for you. And some of the tools will fit tendencies. And be easy. If you have a small group of customers, look, you're likely B2B, but you also may be like Ferrari or NetJets or something where you know your customer group. And then this will fit. And as part of this next step, you, Jonathan, and maybe some others, I think it was really just you, took the entire business world, like the entire business world.
Well, before we move there, let's mention the 6th model, because we haven't talked about it, which is performance marketing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it is the most brilliant piece of
never to be forgotten.
Never to be forgotten. But if there is a tool that you can misuse, that is the prime candidate. You can cause much more damage through performance marketing. I hate that marketers have fallen into the trap of not thinking all marketing is performance marketing. There's performance now and there's performance in the future. So don't call performance in the future brand building. That's performance marketing. And let's rebrand performance marketing for what it is. It's shooting fish in a barrel marketing.
It is harvesting all the demand. And I think depending on the category, the idea that performance marketing is actually creating a lot of demand and filling the marketing funnel and prospecting for customers, that is a whole nother show, but worth a long-term argument. But one of the things that has happened and is behind this whole toolbox idea is, in the rush to performance marketing, and which is essentially still often last touch attribution, almost all the other marketing valuations are coming in second, and that is probably not helping marketers anywhere, and surely hurting companies long term. Is that a fair kind of thought?
It's absolutely a fair. And my former colleague at Wolf Owens, Paul Worthington, when he was on your show, talked about the weaponization of the Wanamaker paradox, and referred to how the tech companies have exploited marketers' fear to sell them performance marketing tools that effectively get them to eat their seed corn, the corn that they should be planting for the future. They're now eating in the present. And then they're wondering why there isn't a harvest next year. Exactly.
Look, that is a really super show, and there's a little rant in the middle of that on performance marketing.
Well, he is true to the cliche.
We got British, we got Scottish.
Hey, he's a Scot.
Very continental. So I want to move on to then in an effort, rather than just classify the tools and figure out how to use them right away, there was a look across the business world where you clustered all the companies into segments based on capital, employees, innovation, and some other variables, with the idea that we could layer the toolbox on top of this business look. And so this is essentially segmentation of the entire business world, including all the marketing you can think of, B2B, B2C, anything else you want to throw in there. Tell us a little bit about this segmentation and what it showed.
Yeah, so all it showed is that different types of cost are relatively more important in certain industries than others. So you've got a group of industries where product costs are an enormous proportion of the final price paid by the consumer. At the absolute extreme, wholesalers, they don't make anything. They just literally they take in products from the producer and they distribute them. So the cost of the product is often 90% of their revenue. But also, if you're producing things like building products or some forms of industrial good, or mining, or oil and gas, sometimes the cost of physically producing this thing is very, very large.
Right.
You've got a group of industries that cluster around that. You've got a group of industries that cluster around that staff costs are incredibly high. We've talked about hospitality and law firms and consulting firms and even airlines. Staff, it's not the cost of the plane, it's not the cost of the fuel, it's the cost of the people that is expensive for an airline. So you've got almost at the opposite extreme. The product cost isn't high, the staff costs are high. Then you've got a cluster of industries that are really driven by innovation. We think of that as software, but it's really tech, hardware, software, and biotech and pharma, with a little bit of consumer goods. But they're spending 3% of revenue on R&D. A pharma company will be spending 12 to 15%. I mean, it is one of their major costs. So we've got a cluster of industries around there. And then we've got a cluster of industries that are really just hugely asset intensive. These are things like utilities, movie theaters. The economics of movie theaters is just awful. You've got this big prime real estate that's used for only 3 hours a day, if you're lucky, maybe just 3 hours a day at the weekends. I mean, it's horrible economics. So we were able to just say there are actually only 5 business models, and which business model or which industry you're in is bound to have an impact on how you do marketing.
Yeah, so the idea is you can layer these tools over kind of the industry clumps, and there's going to be no fixed formula for this.
Yes, correct.
But there will be some indications of it's highly likely that one of these tools will fit better if you have this kind of capital, innovation, and employee profile than another. But every tool will not work in every situation, and I think you can guess some. But Jonathan, if you our listeners can guess some, but if you want to give some examples of where a tool mismatch might occur, toss one out if you feel good about it.
There's a nameless financial services company that I did a lot of work for, and they had a very commoditized product, very functional product, but they kept trying to add bells and whistles to it without realizing that when their customer had made the decision, it was unlikely that they were going to transition from this product for 5 years, often 20 years. So the customer was buying on the basis of of the bet that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this provider will still have one of the best 3 offerings in the marketplace. We don't really mind whether it's the best or the second best or the third best, but we want them to be around because we're building our business on this. And yet my financial services provider insisted on talking about the very tactical, immediate data that showed that they had the best product in the market right now. And the customer is going,
no, you don't.
You're selling me product, you should be selling me relationship.
Well, this is a lot like when you get into some of the car company ads where they're like, and we can sit 6 and we have 5 car holders and cup holders, and we have financing and we have $200 back there. We are winning on everything. And the customers, maybe that works, but it maybe doesn't. So,
well, can I share a sort of autobiographical?
Sure.
I was cup holder guy for the first 12 years of my career. I started in banking, did an MBA, went into strategy consulting, and particularly value-based strategy consulting. So I really wanted to measure everything. And I thought that if you couldn't measure it, it didn't matter. And it took working on a strategy project for J&B Whiskey in France for me to go, the customer isn't buying, the fact that this whiskey is distilled for 12 and a half years versus 11 and a half years for its competitor. The customer is buying something more than the cup holder. And that was my epiphany moment of where, the value creation begins with producing something that the customer wants.
Yes, instead of 12 and a half, we did 12 and 3/4 years. So therefore, everyone will flock immediately to us. So, earlier in the show, I mentioned, and when we started this project, I mentioned that all these documents, all of them available, many of which are fabulous documents, really well written and helpful in the thinking. None of them really helped me when I was in a Snowflake problem. I had to start from scratch again.
Yeah.
And I hear from a lot of marketers that they have to start from scratch. Why will this effort be different?
That's such a good question. I mean, it will be different because we're not trying to say that we have produced the definitive answer. We have produced a way of thinking about the problem that hopefully will help you generate an explanation to your finance people about why we're doing marketing the way we're doing it, and how to talk about the output from your process in language that the finance people will go, I want some of that. I want some of that revenue. I want some of that pricing power. I want some of that certainty of demand, going back to your predictable, forecastable model. They just want to know that if the marketer says we will, we have a 95% confidence interval about producing this much revenue 4 quarters out, you are going to be golden with your finance people. So our goal is really to provide you with a set of frameworks to help you think about what's special about your situation and why you're doing what you're doing.
Excellent. Hey, so based on your observations and all of your consulting, particularly with whiskey, I really enjoy whiskey. What should marketers be doing right now that they're not doing? When you look at all this work, that's eventually going to come out through the ANA, what should marketers be doing now that they're not doing?
2 things, and they're related. So the first is talk about business impact, not creative impact. I loved what Mariam said. Mariam Banakaram, said on your show that she was a business person first and a marketer second. And I think that is the man. Anyone who wants to move above and broader than marketing absolutely has to have that mantra. If you want to stay in marketing, that's fine. You don't need, well, it still helps to keep your job if you're talking about business impact. But the second point is that creativity is really important, and it's important in 2 ways. It's important because creativity is the way that you keep your brand fresh, where you don't actually do anything very dramatic with the positioning, but you do update it to be culturally relevant. And creativity is also the way in which you break out from and get people to think differently about their needs and your brand versus your competitors. And I want marketers to get a little bit more sophisticated in when they refer to creativity. Is it creativity with a goal of ensuring that our revenues 3 quarters out are predictable because we've stayed relevant to the needs of our customers? Or is it that we're going to have a blowout quarter because we've done something dramatic because every time the CFO hears creativity, they hear risk. And most of the time they don't want risk, but they do want a portfolio with some risk.
I do. And let's be clear, when you say creativity, we're not talking about the whiskey brand going from 12 and a half to 12 and 3/4 aging. And you're talking about a totally different way to refresh the brand so people pay attention and understand what it gives them, not a tiny measurable cup holder answer, correct?
Right. Yes. I mean, it's that, I hate to use a popular, a consumer product, but what Cadbury's have done with the glass and a half in everyone is just absolutely beautiful. And that has legs in terms of they can do or MasterCard's priceless campaign, that idea can just be constantly refreshed. So that's what I call beta marketing, where beta is a measure of risk and you want a low beta. So that's the marketing that is going to keep people coming back again and again and again. Alpha, which is...
And we would say beta in the US.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, very good. All right, but I like that. Ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. I think it's really good. It's good. It's very continental. I really like it. So...
So I think those two things, business impact, and when you talk about creativity, talk about whether you're creative to remain relevant without repositioning, or creativity where you're trying to create a new paradigm. Because your CFO is going to want to spend 80% of the budget on the first and only 15% of the budget on the second, unless, of course, they're up a creek with no paddle, in which case branding is typically, as I know from my days at Wolf Owens, the last gasp of the desperate.
Well, we have a CFO coming up on the show soon, so we'll talk to him about that. So last question, because we need to wrap. Right. Funniest story, it's a two-parter. You can take one or both, but you have to take at least one. Funniest story, or you can tell on the air, or practical advice we haven't discussed yet. Take one or both. Up to you.
Can I be greedy and take both?
Of course.
Okay. So funny story, and I hope you'll laugh. But anyway, here we go. So I began life at the Bank of England, and I was doing macroeconomic analysis of Eastern Europe. And as part of that, I used to be part of the government team that went to the debt rescheduling talks. So we were talking with Mexico. I went to the one specifically with Poland that had done 6 debt rescheduling agreements. Where they'd said, yeah, we owe you the money, but we haven't got the money. So the result was nobody knew what Poland owed. And I went back and I reconstructed what Poland had owed originally, and then went through the verbiage of each of these rescheduling agreements. I produced this quarterly forecast of exactly what was owed in principal and interest under each of these 6 debt rescheduling agreements. And so I was proud as punch. I went up to the leader of the delegation, who was a German guy, and he looked at it and said, "This is magnificent. Now we know exactly how much we are owed and when we are not going to get paid." And the lasting life lesson to that was, you can put all the numbers down you like, but at the end of the day, business is human, and the numbers aren't.
There was definitely the funniest foreign debt story we've had on the air of CMO Confidential. If you wanted to throw in a last piece of practical advice before we ring off, go ahead.
Yeah, I think also when I was in management consulting, the one piece of advice that's really stuck with me was the partner saying to me at the time, "You will never have more time than you have at the moment." And my first reaction was, "You're absolutely insane. We're pulling all-nighters to get this project done. That makes no sense whatsoever." And I think it really was a very good piece of advice, because it essentially says, you will make time for the things that are important to you. So observe what you do, and that'll tell you what your life is going to be. Of course, I ended up quitting management consulting. So
there you go. Well, you never have more time than the moment. So I think that's a great way to sign off. Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you are enjoying our show, please like, share, and subscribe. Look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include Marketing, the battle between believers and non-believers. Is the CMO position the hardest job in business? A report from the media front lines, and what your agency really wants to tell you but won't, parts 1 and 2. Hey, all you marketers, be safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.